And that way, if you want to, you can go back and look at this. And if you miss something, instead of having Stan repeat everything, we'll have it as a recording. Um, Stan has really been gracious enough to help us out with a church website, um, and that way we can upload videos and devotionals and everything we need there. So if you want to catch up on things, we'll put that up there. I've been putting some devotionals. I have a lot more to go there as well. So we've been in a situation where we really have to have some flexibility there. And some people that are kind of introverted anyway, like myself, we're okay with this, I mean, the truth of the matter is I work from home all the time. I went from starting off my school career, from having about 50% of my classes online. Now it's 100%, so, but for the longest time I was at 75, but now I'm at 100%. But that's okay, and it seems to be working. My students seem to like it that I communicate with them as soon as possible. But as a pastor, I'm also available to people whenever they need me. I'm available to you. If you email me or you text me, I'm definitely here for you. Unfortunately, we can't do face to face. I have been hearing from Lidio. Some of you know who that young lady is. She's having a lot of difficulties. She was very depressed because she missed the Lord's Supper. I had emailed her, but she just didn't see it. I don't know what happened there. And I texted her, but she never got the information. And so really couldn't help her with that. I think if this thing can blow over in maybe in a month or so, who knows? I mean, we might be able to accommodate folks again. Um, it's better late than never. It's my attitude towards that. Um, but we're going to start off with a prayer. But before that, I just wanted to let you know that heard some pretty good news from the president yesterday, and from different people, and they're saying that this thing might be blowing over faster than we thought. It's possible some people already got sick and they didn't know it. They thought they had a little cold, or because it doesn't affect everybody the same way. They're using the blood plasma to get antibodies to be able to cure people from that. They can use that to help people. So that's very encouraging. So a lot of things very encouraging. So the president wants to start opening up the economy, but only in places where it seems like it's already leveled off and it seems like everything's gotten better. So I don't know where we are with that yet, but I think things are going to get better before they get uh, before anything changes. So we're going to go into a word of prayer, and then I'm going to hand it off to Stan and leave it up to him to continue with the study. It sounds a very interesting study. I'd like to hear it myself because of the fact that it's about the end times. In fact, I was talking about the end times last week, and I'll continue with that next week. But he was talking about 30 years, as I think you said, was he figures out is the time when the end will come. If that's the case, some of us will be gone, so who knows? But anyway, we'll leave that up to him to discuss that, because I don't know very much more about that, because I'm not really sure how we arrived at that. I've always operated on the premise that the end of the world can come any day, and more importantly, to be ready just in case anything happens, and we should be ready. We shouldn't be worried about well, what day is it going to be. I think the Lord wants us to be ready all the time. But what if we die tomorrow? What if you have a car accident? What if you have an illness? Then your world has already ended. Martha's logging on there. I've lost my two, some of my sisters there already, and I lost my parents already. We thought they'd last a lot longer. My sisters were actually younger than I am. And I thought, they would live a lot longer, but who knows? The point is that we need to be ready, right? And that's the attitude that we need to have. But with that said, let's go into a word of prayer, and then we'll leave it up to Stan to continue with whatever he has prepared for us, and that the Lord has laid in his heart to present. Heavenly Father, we come before you at this time to pray and ask for your sanctification. Father, we know that we're nothing special on our own, but having a relationship with our Father makes us special. And for that, we are so grateful, Lord. Forgive us for our shortcomings and weaknesses. Empower us with your Holy Spirit. Give us wisdom and discernment and understanding. Help us to trust in you, Lord, with all our heart and soul. Whatever you have prepared for your servant, Lord, to present this morning, we ask that you will help us to open our minds and hearts to receive it. And may it be something that is inspired through wisdom and discernment. And may we be able to understand it a lot better in a more meaningful manner. Father, we want to just thank you and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. And she's talking to her hubby there. Okay, Stan, do you think we should have our Bibles open in something, or what would you advise?
No, everything will be on the screen. As long as you can see the screen, you'll be good with that. So
okay,
I'll just
you go ahead and take over there.
All right. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, I see it there.
A message that the name of it is How Long?
Yeah, I see that.
Okay,
Anybody
good.
else see that? I don't know.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Is there a way to make it bigger or not?
Yeah, I was wondering if some people might have trouble with that. I'll try.
Okay.
I see it.
That's good enough that way?
Make it a little bit bigger, the letters.
Let me just see if I get rid of this. Does that?
Yeah, that helps.
Better.
Bump
Yes.
that up a little.
Yeah,
Good.
That's good like that?
Yes.
All right, good. Yeah, this is my first time playing with this, so I haven't used Zoom in the past. We've used Skype a long time ago, and now we're using something called Teams from Microsoft. So Zoom is a little bit different. Yeah, okay, so this did come out of Pastor Joe's sermon last week. He was talking about the end times and things like that, and somehow the question came up about how long it was going to be. I said that it would be at least 30 years. And I think that he was surprised to hear a number like that, and probably other people were surprised at that too. And so this message is going to be about that idea of how long. And a lot of people are asking these questions right now. Because of this virus that's going around, a lot of people are asking if this is a warning from God or a judgment from God. Along with that, they're asking that question about how long it'll be until the Messiah returns. And you're going to hear my clock once in a while in the background chiming away. Sorry about that. And so this study is about that question. How long is it going to be until he returns? Now, we can't know exactly because we only have some particular events that are described in prophecy. And until those events really kick in, we can't tell. But we can get a pretty good idea of what the least amount of time is. And that's what we're going to look at in this. A lot of people talk about the return of Jesus could happen at any time, but it can't happen at any time. We don't know the time, of course, but we have Paul's words and others that there is a bunch of things that must happen in advance before Jesus comes back. And it kind of surprises me that some people would say that it could happen any day, because that was something Paul dealt with back in the book of Thessalonians. There were people in his time who were saying that Jesus had already returned, and he was disputing that. And the words that he say apply to the people who say that it could happen any day here too. And what he says is, don't believe these people. There are things that must happen. There are things that must happen before Jesus comes back. And the two things that he lists are what's called the great falling away, which is when a large number of people in Christianity, including even the elders in Christianity, turn away from God. And the other thing that he refers to is what he calls the man of sin, who has lots of other names. Antichrist is the name that we'll be using in this study. And he talks about the man of sin must be revealed and must do his work that he's going to be doing. So there are definitely things that must be happening or must happen before Jesus comes back. And that's the basis for this study. Is we're going to look at a few of those things that happen. And we're going to look at things that have beginning points and end points, and we can kind of link those together.
La amarras y luego yo les tiro para acá.
And
La rama y yo les tiro para acá cuando la acabes de cortar.
and that linking those together will make it possible for us to get an idea of how short a time it will be. And so these things that I've chosen for us to look at have some requirements. They have to obviously occur before Jesus' return. They have to have specific beginning and ending events. They need to form a sequence so that they don't overlap, and that one comes after another, and we can know that one comes after another. And they either have a specified time length that's given in the Bible, or we can put together a really reasonable estimate of how long that's going to be. So that's going to be our approach here. So we're going to look at a few different prophecies that we can link together into a series that's going to give us an idea of the minimum time that it could be. Now, it could certainly be longer. The event that's going to start this sequence we'll talk about, but until that event starts, that 30 years doesn't start. So 30 years is the least it could be, but it could be more. Okay, and we'll...
Could I ask you a question, Stan? I was wondering, one of the things that kind of makes me feel like it might be closer to the end is because of the great falling away first that you mentioned. It seems to me that we're seeing a lot of that right now.
Oh,
yeah.
This is like, see.
That's a reasonable thing to think. And that actually started, I would say, back in the 60s, and in Europe more than here. Europe really turned away from God in a big way. The churches there pretty much disappeared. They're down to a very small number. But and then now that's moving into this country and all of North America, I'd say, as people begin to turn away. But apparently this great turning away is going to be a worldwide event, and it's going to be driven by the Antichrist and the things that he does. He's really going to shake the faith of people and make it hard for people to believe in God. And so it's going to be different somehow, but you're right that we have to ask ourselves, how can it be any different from what we're seeing right now? And that's a good question. But there will be something that he does or says that will cause people to really turn away.
Could I pass along a message that Cynthia just put out on Facebook? I mean, rather on the messaging. There is a microphone way to the extreme right there. If you will click on that and turn it off, if you're not talking, because every time anybody talks, it's going to take away the screen from Stan. So if you will, please turn and mute this off. In fact, I'll do that myself and then turn it back on whenever I.
Yeah. Okay, I'll continue. So this study, we're going to start with the second coming and work backward from there with different events that are prophesied. And the first event that we're going to look at is Daniel's 7 years of tribulation. We mentioned this before, the 7-year period. This leads up to Jesus coming back. At the very end of that 7 years is when he comes back. Okay. And this period is called the tribulation, and the last half of it is also referred to as the Great Tribulation, and that's the time when things get really, really bad. And so Daniel 9 talks about that quite a bit. And it says, and let me back up just a little bit. There are a bunch of names that are used in the Bible for the person that we commonly call the Antichrist. Only John refers to him as the Antichrist. Paul sometimes calls him the man of sin. And here you're going to see him called the priest who is to come, or the one who makes desolate. We don't know his name, of course. All we know is characteristics about him, and so he tends to be referred to by those characteristics. And so you're going to see that here as we go through some of these things. But all of these passages are talking about that same person and that organization. And that's a point to be made too, is that the Antichrist, while he is a person and the leader, he is a leader of an organization that is also Antichrist. So keep those two things in mind, because sometimes the Bible will talk about just the person, and sometimes it'll talk about the whole organization. Okay, so from Daniel 9, verse 27, it says, "And he," and that's the prince who is to come, "will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate." So simplifying that a little bit, it says that this prince who is to come is going to make a firm covenant. It's going to allow Israel to do sacrifices and grain offerings on the Temple Mount. And but at the end of or halfway through that period that he agrees to, that 7-year period that he agrees to, halfway through it, he's going to attack Jerusalem and sack it and put an end to all of those sacrifices and offerings. So he breaks the deal that he has made and takes Jerusalem by force. And so those things have to happen in that 7-year period. And we're not that concerned about the 7-year period itself. We're really looking for what the conditions are at the beginning of that tribulation period. And so for that to begin, we can see that we need to have the Antichrist on the scene, and he has to have some authority to do stuff. Apparently he has the authority to make a deal here with Israel that allows the sacrifices to begin on the Temple Mount. And so considering that agreement has been made, we have to ask ourselves some questions. Why would he make such an agreement? And who is he that he has the authority to make such agreement? And what does he get out of making this agreement? Those are all good questions to ask. And perhaps a related question that we need to look at is why no one right now is making that kind of agreement. For Israel's side, there are people in Israel right now who are ready to start those sacrifices right away. They've gone through all the training and the preparation, and they're ready to go as soon as it's possible. They just aren't allowed to do it right now. And the reason they're not allowed to do it right now is that the Muslims are stopping it. The Muslims have a claim to the Temple Mount. And because of that claim, they won't allow Israel to do anything up there. They even try to stop Jews from praying up there. And so it isn't just hatred of the Jews. It's because two of the holiest sites in Islam are on the Temple Mount. The Dome of the Rock Mosque you've probably heard of, and there's another one that's not too far away from it, both of them on the Mount. And they believe those are sites that are tied to Muhammad, and so they're very important to them. And so this person who's going to make this agreement has to have the authority to make that agreement, and the Muslims have to be to allow that to happen. And that's something that simply wouldn't happen right now. So things have to change there. We can tell that, well, we first saw that the Antichrist has to be on the scene to make this deal. And we see that the Muslims have to be prepared to accept that deal. And at least for 3.5 years, that is acceptable to them. And so because the Antichrist has to have this ability to make a deal that the Muslims are going to be happy with, a lot of people think that he is the Mahdi or the 12th Imam of Islam. And we won't go into that topic here. But that it would make sense that he has a Muslim background or is accepted by Muslims as a special person. And that would be probably the only way that he could represent Muslims in such an agreement like that. So obviously significant changes have to happen. Our world doesn't look like that right now. There is no person that we would call the Antichrist, and certainly no deal is going to be made to allow Israel to do that.
Stan, let me ask something though. There are no sacrifices right now. They have ceased, right? So I'm not really sure whether this is not already happening, because of that. I don't know. I can't hear you right now, Stan.
Wait.
I think we lost your voice.
You lost my voice?
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Let me just check my headphones. Nice.
It was just temporarily went blank there.
Yeah, my headphones died for no good reason.
Oh, no.
Okay, do you hear me through the headphones now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Yeah, my headphones shut off for reasons I don't know. Okay, so we know from that it's at least 7 years until Jesus comes, because he comes at the end of that 7-year period. So now we're going to look backwards to see what kind of things have to happen and what prophecy says happens to put into existence that situation where there is this Antichrist person who will make this deal with Israel that will allow them to begin the sacrifices on the Temple Mount. And so the Antichrist is part of a new world order. Now, don't confuse that with a lot of the conspiracy theorists talking about a new world order that is to come. By new world order, I just mean something that isn't the same as the current world order. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through here. And so the Bible says that the Antichrist comes up from a 10-toed world that Daniel's statue describes. And we talked about that a few weeks ago when we were still meeting together. And so the 10 toes on that statue represent the 10 last kingdoms of man. And Daniel's going to refer to that, but he uses it in terms of a beast that has 10 horns and 7 heads and horns and crowns on those heads. And so he uses a different way to refer to those 10 kingdoms, but it's still the same 10 kingdoms that he's talking about. And so he talks about this. He says the Antichrist is going to be a person who comes out of that system. So that 10-horned world order is going to be coming into existence before him, and he will come up out of that. And we'll see the verses here as we go through this. So I'll read this. Okay, this comes from Revelation 13, 1 and 9. And I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast ascending from the sea, which had 10 horns and 7 heads, and upon its horns 10 diadems or crowns, and upon its heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, and its feet like those of a wolf, and its mouth like that of lions. And the dragon gave its throne, its power, and great authority to it. We know who the dragon is, that's Satan. And one of its heads was as if it had been crushed to death, and its mortal wound was healed. And all earth marveled after the beast. And they worshiped the dragon that gives authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like this beast, and who is able to war with it?" And the mouth that speaks great things. Now I'll just pause there. One of the references to the Antichrist is also in terms of his big mouth. He has a big blasphemous mouth and makes all sorts of bold and crazy things in it that he says. And that's something that many passages refer to about him, is he's a blasphemer before God. He's always saying evil things about God, or saying that God is evil. So that verse again, and the mouth that speaks great things, and blasphemy was given to it, and authority was given to him to work for 42 months, 3.5 years. And it opened its mouth to blaspheme before God, to blaspheme the name and the dwelling of those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to make war with the holy ones. Now that's us. So it was granted to make war with us and to conquer us. And it was given authority over all generations, peoples, languages, and nations. And all the inhabitants of earth will worship it, those who were not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain before the foundation of the world. He who has an ear, let him hear. Okay, so that's Revelation talking about that same 10-toed world order. And in that, as I said before, the beasts represent kingdoms. The heads of the beast represent kingdoms. The horns represent kings or leaders. We might call them presidents now, or prime ministers, or who knows what. And the diadems are crowns, which represent the authority. So we know this because the angel who speaks to Daniel explains what those symbols mean. So we don't have any doubt about the meaning of those symbols. Sorry about that. The beast was described elsewhere in a different book as having 10 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns. But now it only has 7 horns, or 7 heads. And that change happens because of something that happens with the Antichrist. And Daniel is also told about that. And so because of that, 3 of the kingdoms get merged together. So it starts out as a 10-kingdom world. 3 of the kingdoms are made submissive or conquered or something like that, and merged into another kingdom. So there's really only 7 kingdoms at the time the Antichrist comes up out of this world system. So you can see that there's a few things that have to happen. This 10-toed or 10-headed kingdom has to come into existence, and then this person rises up within it, and he changes it, conquers 3 of those kingdoms, and becomes one of the major leaders of it. And Daniel talks about that, so I'll just go ahead and read that. So, and this is from Daniel 7. And an angel is describing this. These are the words of an angel. Or it will be. The first bit is Daniel's words, and then the last bit will be the angels. Okay, so while I was contemplating the 10 horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. So there you go with that great boasting mouth again. Thus he said, now this is the angel speaking, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise with them, and he will be different from the previous ones, and he will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High, there's that big mouth again, and wear down the saints of the highest one. That's us again. And he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. And that's again that 3.5-year period that we talked about. So the angel is confirming what we saw earlier. So we see that this world order is going to become very opposed to God, although it probably doesn't start that way. It probably just starts out as 10 kings in the same way that we have kings now. Some of them are anti-God, some of them are not anti-God. But it appears that the effect of the Antichrist is that he turns the whole system against Christians. And it says, wear down the saints of the highest one, and the other verse talked about persecuting us. And that is what we need to expect, is when this comes into effect, it won't be long until we are the bad guys and aren't treated very well. And we've talked about that in many classes before. We just need to have our big boy pants on and ready to deal with it. So in any case, that'll be a problem for the believers when it happens. Okay, so now we know that there's going to be a 10-toed world in place, and the Antichrist comes up out of that and changes it and makes that agreement with the Jews to begin sacrifices on the Temple Mount. So you're seeing kind of a series here of things that have to happen before it's possible for Jesus to come. And now we've moved it back a fair ways in time, although we don't know. We'll get a better idea of that from another prophecy. But right now, all we can see is that there's quite a few things that have to happen. So now we'll talk about the Battle of Ezekiel. Ezekiel 38 and 39 talks about, it's not even fair to call it a battle. That's why I put that in quote marks. God steps into this so-called battle and saves Israel and destroys the attackers. And this is going to be important because it's going to explain why the Muslims would be willing to accept this agreement that would allow Jews to begin the sacrifices on the Temple Mount. In our time, that's unthinkable. The Muslims are simply not going to allow that, and they're prepared to fight about that. And so we have to answer the question of why they would allow that to happen in the future, as prophecy says that it will. And so that's what's going to come out of this battle and understanding what's happening. So in this battle, the attackers are described as coming from the ancestral tribal lands of certain groups of people who were known in Ezekiel's time. And so what we have to do is find out where those people settled in Ezekiel's time, and we know what countries those are now. And we know that those countries are Muslim countries, except for one, which appears to be Russia. And the main instigator of this attack seems to be the person from Russia. So the militaries in these countries are going to act under the pretense of needing to travel through Israel, but the real plan is to loot Israel. And we won't go into Ezekiel 38 and 39 in any detail, though that's a really interesting story. But what Ezekiel 38 especially, and 39 some, does is it speaks directly to that leader, that instigator, and says these words to him. And so I'll read this. Thus says the Lord God, it will come about on that day that thoughts will come into your mind, that instigator's mind, and you will devise an evil plan, and you will say, I will go up against the land of unwalled villages. I will go against those who are at rest. This is Israel he's referring to. You'll see that later on. People that live securely, all of them living without walls and having no bars or gates, to capture spoil and to seize plunder, to turn your hand against the waste places which are now inhabited. Now that's an interesting phrase, waste places which are now inhabited. Before Israel returned in 1948, I think it was, there were a lot of waste places. There were swamps and things, and Israel was not a very habitable place. But now people have moved back, and it is now inhabited again. So we've seen prophecy fulfilled. Well, maybe not in our own times. I don't think we lived that long, but certainly I didn't. But anyway, in recent times, that prophecy was fulfilled, that those waste places are now inhabited. And so to turn your hand against the people who are gathered from the nations, who have acquired, gathered from the nations is again an interesting phrase, because we know that the people of Israel were gathered from all the nations where they had been sent out to, or driven out to, when they were thrown out of Israel back in Roman times. And so these people have acquired cattle and goods, and they live at the center of the world, and we know that the center of the world is Israel, especially Jerusalem. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all its villages will say to you, have you come to capture spoil? Have you assembled your company to seize plunder, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to capture great spoil? And that's a prophetic way of saying this is what they intend to do. They've come to capture Israel. And Israel is a wealthy country. They have a lot of things that they've developed, a lot of technology and science that they are doing. So they've become a very successful country, and they are a target that someone might want to take away just for the value of what they have. And that appears to be what this person is doing, this instigator. So as they pass through this defenseless Israel, and God causes a massive earthquake. The Bible describes mountains being leveled. It uses the word overturned because it doesn't have the same words that we do. Something else that isn't clear happens, and all of the invading people are killed. The prophecy says that animals will begin to eat on the dead bodies as people continuously for 7 months bury all the bodies they find. And then after that 7-month period, a detailed search begins, and people start marking all the body part pieces and assembling them all together, and like a huge mass grave is created for them. And in that mass grave is where all the bodies and body parts are thrown. And that's a big part of what that is, Ezekiel is about, is God destroying the enemies of Israel, as he did in the olden days, and stepping into this and wiping out the Muslim armies. And I said we know they're Muslim now because of the lands that they're coming from. Any questions on this so far?
You were talking about the 10 horns and all that. I think that's the new world order you're talking about.
Yes, yeah. The New World Order starts as 10 kingdoms. Now we can think now in our time that there might be 3 or 4 major countries, and you can call them kingdoms. That's the way the Bible would refer to them. And there are more than 100 other countries that are there in various sizes from that. And so that's our current world order. Our world is based on kind of an American-centered few, like 3 or 4 major countries and a whole bunch of smaller countries, and then even smaller countries than that. So that's our current world order. The new world order will have simply those 10 countries to start with. And so, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, is that's a big change. How does a change like that come about? And so that's one of the questions that we have to ask about. And also one of the things that tell us that there has to be a certain amount of time here for those changes that need to be made to happen. That makes sense?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So the things that from this prophecy that are important to us is to understand that the Islamic armies are wiped out. God is seen as protecting his people again, and Israel was defenseless against this attack, and that's an important part. We'll go into that one some more. So with the Islamic armies gone, there's no longer any power behind their claim to the Temple Mount. They can't enforce that. In fact, it's very likely that that earthquake that caused the destruction of that army is so big that it causes the holy sites on the Temple Mount to be damaged and perhaps even ruined completely. And that would leave the Muslims with little motivation to fight for the Temple Mount anymore. While they might still say they have a claim for it, there might not be anything there. And that little picture that you see to the side there is kind of an interesting idea. It's a picture of God destroying the Dome of the Rock Mosque. You can tell by that golden dome there. And so now, of course, God's finger doesn't directly come down on top of it, but it's the idea that's there. So, and there would be chaos for a while after this stunning defeat. It would be something we haven't ever seen in our lives, where an army that attacks another country is so completely destroyed, and not by the hand of any person, simply by the hand of God, but from the perspective of people, they would probably just call it bad luck or something like that, that this earthquake would come and destroy them. Nonetheless, we know it's God that's behind it. So because of this chaos that's going to happen for a while as people start to figure things out about what happened, and as we saw in that verse, 7 months while Israel collects all the dead bodies together and then starts searching for the smaller body parts that were left by the animals that were eating on them. So there's some time in there when things have to happen. And so the Antichrist emerges out of this system, and probably in a weak form if he's got any Muslim background, because there's no Muslim armies to support him at first. But he still comes out of that, and ultimately he's able to make this deal with Israel. And it would make some sense now if those holy sites have been damaged or irreparably destroyed. It would be an easy thing to give up their claim to the Temple Mount. It could just be a bargaining chip that he could use to get something else that he wants more. So that makes it pretty understandable that the Muslims could lose interest in the Temple Mount and what's on there as a result of this. Okay, and with such an obvious intervention by God to protect his people, the Jews from all other countries are going to begin to return to Israel. There's still a lot of Jews that are in other countries who haven't moved to Israel and don't have a plan to, although there's kind of an ongoing trickle of that, of people slowly moving to Israel who are Jewish. And this would really be a sign that God is fighting for his people again, and so the Jews are going to have a reason to really return to Israel and be God's people again. And so, but the question that leads us forward, although we're going back in time here, is why Israel was defenseless at that time. The verses speak about Israel as a people living without walls and having no bars or gates. And so this symbolism means that they are defenseless against this attack. Somehow or another, these people have been allowed to come through their country, and they are unable to stop that. But right now, if any army wanted to go through Israel, and Israel said no, the answer would be no, because they're able to enforce that. Even altogether, the Muslim armies are no match for Israel. So we can see again that there's a big change that has to be coming here that's going to leave Israel unprotected in this situation. So we're starting to put together kind of a sequence of things here about things that have to happen before, ultimately, before Jesus comes. But right now we're really talking about things that have to happen before that agreement comes that allows Israel to begin sacrifices on the Temple Mount again. And so the reason I think that this is able to happen, that Israel is no longer protected, is because the world order has changed at this time. And so, and they're not supporting Israel. And this instigator from Russia has seen this and seen this as an opportunity to attack Israel because he sees that they're no longer supported. And right now, Israel's support comes from almost entirely from the United States. And without the United States in a new world order, it would be quite likely that they wouldn't have that same support that they have now. And I mentioned before that this kind of lines up with Muslim prophecy. They refer to the United States as the great Satan and Israel as the little Satan. And their prophecy says that the great Satan will be destroyed and then the little Satan will be destroyed. And so that kind of makes some sense in that way too. Any questions?
No, it seems like it's fairly clear there, what you're saying. But there are a lot of presidents and a lot of world leaders that there's an article I found that I'm going to forward to people. I'm not going to go into all of that, but it's pretty much a little scary because of what the people that are saying about the New World Order. For example, Joe Biden said, the affirmative task before us is to create a new world order. And he also said, he wrote an article about how I learned to love the New World Order by Joseph Biden. George Bush also mentioned that we will succeed in the Gulf. This is when they had the Iraqi war. And when we do, the world community will be sent an enduring warning to any dictator or despot, present or future, who contemplates outlaw aggression The world can therefore seize this opportunity to fulfill the long-held promise of a new world order, where brutality will go unrewarded and aggression will meet collective resistance. This was from President George H. Bush. So it's really both parties have talked like that. I've never heard President Trump say that, but it's just a lot of articles, a lot of different people, their quotes on that. So I'm going to probably forward that later on. The only reason I mention that right now is because it does seem like this 10 toes that you're talking about, which is a new world order, it sounds to me like that it's something that it could come together pretty soon, you know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
No, I agree completely with that. And like you're saying, there's a whole lot of leaders and countries that are yearning for that change, for a new world order where there's a single world government, and they believe that will mean that the whole world is better run and better for it. But we know that simply isn't true. And it would be a totalitarian kind of government, which stomps on the people that don't get in line. And we would be the people who don't get in line, so it would be making our lives hard. So yeah, that's absolutely true. The world is yearning for that. They just need the changes that make it possible for this to happen. And that's kind of the key here, is what's going to be that change that allows this to begin. And so that takes us in fact to this next section, becoming that 10-toed world. How does that happen? And we see from the verses that there's a major shift in the current world order. Like I said before, there are 3 or 4 major kingdoms, countries right now, and it depends on how you count them. More than 100 others of different sizes. And we can't imagine how that current order can become 10 kingdoms. It seems unthinkable to have that big a change. It would have to be a major event, a major upheaval that would cause this. But upheavals like that have happened before, and we can look back in history for that. The end of the Roman Empire was one of those things. It controlled pretty much all of the world that mattered. And because of fiscal irresponsibility and things like that, incompetence in government, the rest of it, they collapsed. And out of that collapse, a new world order came. And more recent than that is the World War II change that happened. Before World War II, America was a small player at best, and not really a power in the world. But because of World War II and what happened there, it emerged from World War II as the world power. And afterward, the world economy was restructured around our dollar. So we've seen in the past that those big changes can happen. And like you were saying, Pastor Joe, sometimes they can happen very quickly. Some of the people are already planning what it's going to look like and already have ideas in mind for how to make it happen. So when all the prophecy is considered, one thing is very apparent in this new world order. The United States and really all of North and South America play no significant role in the end times. There's no mention of any countries like that. There's no superpower that steps in to help Israel. There's just no mention of anything like the United States being in there. And what you do see in prophecy is the end times world is a Mediterranean, Eastern European, North African, Russian, and perhaps Chinese world. And nothing else is really significant. And we don't know why that is, but it seems like all of North and South America are just irrelevant in the end times for reasons we don't know.
Maybe people like the United States choose to stay out of this mess or something, you know, maybe.
It could be. But for some reason, but that would be hard to imagine right now because we're such a supporter of Israel. So we're certainly talking about a different kind of government that doesn't support Israel. But certainly there are people in this country that don't want to support Israel. So yeah, it could just be that they're intentionally staying out of it, but it could also be that something more serious has happened and they're incapable of being involved in it. Whatever, that's all just guesswork there.
Yeah, I mean,
so
it could be another plague or something, or it could be something terrible that could happen here that would nullify us, so to speak.
Yeah, it could be something like that. We just don't know. All we know is that there isn't a superpower like the United States in anything in prophecy, not playing any role anyway. So economists and others have discussed these world order transitions and how they happen and how they become something new and how long that takes really. And the supporters of the old order always try to keep that old order going for a while. They try to rebuild it, restore it to what it was. And that happened after World War II. There was a lot of people at first who were trying to get back to the way things were before World War II. But that just didn't work because things had really shifted. The European countries were heavily in debt. The US was the country that was now the superpower. And so the world order had shifted, and they just need to realize it. And there are also supporters of multiple ideas for a new world order, and eventually one of those prevails. And in the case of World War II, that was what we call the Bretton Woods Accord, where it was decided that the US dollar would now be the dollar that would be used, or the currency that would be used pretty much as the currency around the world. So in that short period of time from the end of World War II until the Bretton Woods Accord, which wasn't all that long afterwards, the world order shifted. It went from what it was before World War II into what it is now. And so while we think these things are unimaginable, when they happen very quickly. And these people who talk about such transitions say that it takes something like 3 years to do that. And so that 3 years is a number that we're going to use in the summary. And we are getting close to the end. Okay, so
You don't
we've
have
seen
to rush too much. I mean,
I'm not trying to rush, but we are really at a good point to close anyway, and I'll just push on a little bit here. Okay, so we've seen a lot of things here. We've seen that there are many things that have to occur before Jesus returns. We've seen that the Antichrist must be on the scene to make the agreement with Israel. He must be willing to allow the Jews to begin sacrifices on the Temple Mount, which is unthinkable right now. He must be able to represent the Muslims in that, and the Islamic holy sites on the Temple Mount must not be that important to them. But right now, those Islamic holy sites, they believe those are two places where Muhammad had significant events in his life. One of them was what they call his night ride, where he left from there to ascend into heaven or wherever Islamic people go. And so that's an important site for them, and they're not going to give it up for just nothing. So we know that something big has to happen there that's going to allow that agreement to happen. And there has to be a major change in the world order. We talked about it quite a bit already. The current world order must fail and be replaced by this 10 kingdom world order. And we also saw from the verses that the Antichrist comes out of that new world order. Once it's established with the 10 kingdoms, he comes up out of it and changes it, makes it into 7 kingdoms. And we also know that somehow through this change in the world order, Israel is left unprotected. And some attacker tries to take advantage of that, and God steps in to make sure that doesn't happen. So a lot of things have to happen before Jesus' return.
I was thinking maybe United States is not included because maybe it's not part of those 10 countries you're talking about, perhaps.
Well, the Bible says that the whole world is run. These 10 countries are the whole world. Now, when the Bible says the whole world, it doesn't necessarily mean absolutely all of it. It talks about the Roman kingdom conquering the whole world, and we know it didn't conquer the whole world. It certainly didn't conquer North America. And so when the Bible says that, it means all of the world that is significant, that has any real value. And so it could be that the United States is still around, but it doesn't have any value anymore. And so maybe it isn't part of those 10 kingdoms. So it could be.
And then I was reflecting how everything is studied on the East, and that how everything is going to end up on the East, you know, like from the beginning, where was the world created. And maybe that's how God has a plan, you know, where it starts is where it ends. I don't know.
Well, in a sense, it does. In the end, after all of these things are gone and the millennial period is gone, we see the tree of life coming back again as something that's available to us as it was in the Garden of Eden. So there's certainly something to that. But the time that we're talking about is still well before that. Okay, so these events that have been described in the Bible here are something that some of them have particular exact dates to them, and another one we can guess a date for. So the first thing that has to happen is the collapse of the current world order. We don't know how that's going to happen, but it results in the establishment of a new order. And that group that I mentioned estimates that those sort of things tend to take about 3 years' time as people decide what the new world order is going to be and decide that the old world order just can't work anymore. And then there's a little gap. I just couldn't fill this gap here, but it probably isn't very long. So after the establishment of this new order, this person from Russia gets this idea that he can take Israel and uses the Muslims to do it. And how long does that take for him to realize that and put that together? Probably not all that long, I would say. It's one of those things, if you're going to take advantage of it, you want to hit quick. So probably as soon as he sees that the new order is not going to be supporting Israel, he goes for it. So it's probably a very small time gap in there. And then, so Israel is defenseless to this attack when it comes, and then that's Ezekiel's battle. And out of that, this has to make it possible for the Antichrist to be able to allow sacrifices on the Temple Mount. And actually in prophecy, I won't go into why, there's a date attached to this, and it's a 20-year date. And so just kind of accept that. And it's kind of a reasonable date too, from the time of this crushing defeat of the Muslim countries until there is a Muslim representative again who is able to speak for them. 20 years is not an unreasonable amount of time there. They would certainly have to rebuild everything. Okay, so once those sacrifices are allowed on the Temple Mount, that begins the 7-year period that leads to the second coming. So that's where I got the 30 years from. It's that those 20 years plus 3 plus 7. And you can see what I've done here is I've taken 3 different prophecies or 2 different prophecies and one common sense thing, and made it possible for us to chain them together and get an estimate for the shortest amount of time it could be. Now, this, of course, begins with the collapse of the current world order. Until that happens, the 30-year period hasn't started.
Seems to me that if they're allowed to sacrifice, then they must feel very confident in being in a peaceful setting to do that.
Yes.
Which makes them more vulnerable, which makes them feel like as if they can put their walls down and allow themselves to be defenseless.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I can think of. Something has to happen that they're so confident that they're safe and they're at peace. And unfortunately, all that's going to fall apart. I mean, and I
Yeah.
would agree, obviously that's going to have to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, the Bible only gives us little snapshots in these things, and we are only left to guess with the pieces that aren't covered about exactly how they happen. And I tried not to do any more guessing than I needed to here, and just let you look at it. But that's the only way to answer some of these questions, like how does this new world order come into being? Because it's kind of something we can't imagine at this time, but we know that it is coming.
One question that I have is maybe that 20 years doesn't have to necessarily be that. That's more flexible right there, I think. It could be less or it could be more, so in my opinion,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever number you use there, you can see that there's still a fair bit of time. It certainly isn't a case where Jesus could come at any time. There's a lot of things that have to happen, and we can see major transitions in the world happening before those things can happen.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I kind of spoke my conclusion out, so we'll just leave it there, and I'll turn it back to Pastor Joe.
Okay, let me try to unmute folks in case they want to have anything last words to say. So apparently some people that unmuted themselves, I think Sister Linda's on the bottom there. Apparently if you muted yourself, I can't unmute you, but I took the liberty of muting a couple of folks there. Anyway, I did email that article that I saw on the internet about the different quotations from different people and world leaders that support the New World Order. I emailed it to Cynthia, and if you're interested in it, she can forward that to you later on, whatever, but it's interesting, but there's a lot of support for it. and it's not by a specific political party or anything like that. Pretty much anybody can be involved with that, and which makes me wonder, what's to stop it from actually happening, and really taking place, because there's a lot of people, even Bill Clinton was involved with that, the Bushes and Obama and Joe Biden and so forth. So it's not a political thing. It's more about what people think it's best for the world, And you might say, well, I don't care about the New World Order, so what, whatever. But the problem with the New World Order, when I studied a little bit there, and it probably takes a lot more to discuss about it than we have time for. But the problem with the New World Order is that they would suspend the constitutions of the countries. And there goes your right to speech. There goes your freedom of religion. There goes, the right to worship any way you want, the right to bear arms and so forth. All of those sort of things leave us defenseless too. You know what I mean? And that is very scary. And so like right now, we're taking for granted that we can worship and do whatever we want and anytime we want. But that New World Order kicks in, we would have to go underground, and that's not something that we would like to do. Martha wants you to scroll down to the conclusion so we can see the bottom part of that, if you will.
I just want to say that to me it's kind of heavy me that I've been reading the Bible throughout, and I can imagine when I come to Ezekiel it's gonna be really, really hard. Because even now I'm going over the chapters, and so I'm trying to understand that I understand what Brother Joe was saying about the new order that is gonna be really bad, for us. That I would love to listen it to again and trying to discern more, but it's very interesting. It's really interesting.
Well, this is all going to be on a recording, and so when we're done, I'll stop recording, and the system will automatically save it. Stan will have access to it, and he will upload it. But there's a lot to discuss there about the New World Order. I can confidently say that my family, Martha, at least Martha and I and my son Ruben, we're not concerned about any New World Order. We're not going to compromise anything at all, and that's just the way it is. But I cannot say the same thing for everybody that I know, including some of my other family members. They can be very compromising. I mean? They can very, very easily accept the norm. They can accept what's more popular, and I'm kind of stunned to see that, but it is what it is. And I know where I stand, and I know where some of you do. There's going to be a very small remnant of people that are going to be able to stand together and face this, even if it means death. Nobody wants to die, but even I'm not willing to live my life in compromise. That's just not me at all. I've gone through so much in my life that I can honestly tell you that I will not compromise my faith or anything anybody says, just to make everybody happy and go along to get along. I think that's one of the reasons, as we left the previous church, and I'm not prepared to throw stones at them, to be honest with you. It's just that there was some compromising going on over there, and we were unwilling to do it, and this is where we are. But who knows? Maybe the good Lord, if we continue this, if you went up to the website and you went on Facebook, you'll notice there's a lot of people that are starting to know our website. So there's a lot of people of like mind that probably, I think yesterday I saw as many as 50 people get into the website or more. So maybe this is the way the Lord is going to spread out the message, you know, and I'm on board with that. It's helpful that we have people like Stan and even myself that are technical enough to make this happen, to take advantage of being able to be technically savvy enough to spread the gospel and the message throughout the world. You know, this is the reason why Russia and the Cold War ended, because of a lot of that information got in, you know, about the truth, and that's why it all fell apart. So, but these are things of encouragement there, where the Lord does not want us to compromise. He wants us to have faith. He wants us to have hope and confidence. Whether this is 30 years from now or whatever, but I have to concur that it's not going to be that soon. But I don't like to go around telling people he might come in 30 years because they say, "Oh, got 30 years to go." You know, I got to do a lot of damage in 30 years.
We should never think like that.
Pardon me?
We should never think like that.
I know, but see, I think you know people and I know people that you tell them you got 30 years. Oh, no problem then. I got plenty of time here. I don't want people to think that way, you know. So I would probably keep that under my hat, you know, but but nevertheless, I am prepared, because you know what, if we die tomorrow, then it is the end of the world for us, you know. So I'm prepared for that, you know. I had some close calls in my health, but I'm still here. But I'm here for the grace of God, and by the grace of God, and I know that He'll keep me alive long enough to fulfill whatever responsibilities and obligations I might have to Him and to His people. Does anybody want to have any other questions or comments before we close?
I'll just add a little bit more to what you were saying, in fact, about this new world order not having the same rights to it that we're used to right now. We can already see during this virus, this epidemic, that there are people who are already trying to clamp down on rights, gun ownership rights, right to go to church. There are already people who are acting against that. They have an agenda that they're trying to push forward.
I heard yesterday that a guy was pulled over because he was driving by himself. And I said, oh, we're going to go down that road. We're in serious trouble, because that could have been me too. And or people that are walking around. Why are you walking around? You know, go back to your house. You know, that's scary. You know, we're going to come to that. So I know one of my brother-in-law, actually, he's very concerned that the government may be taking advantage of the situation by having greater control over people and so forth. You know, I don't know. But it is troublesome in some regard, but you know what? We're still operating here. We're still working.
Pastor Joe,
Yes.
I'd like to say something that every morning when we pray at 7 o'clock in the morning in unison, that really, really helps, I think, everybody, knowing that our church together in unison, we're praying to our God, and we need that right now. I do
agree.
feel that this virus, or whatever it is, how lethal or not it is a type of spiritual warfare as well. And so every morning when we wake up and pray together in unison, it gives everybody strength. It strengthens us as people, our faith, our church, and we just need to keep on doing it. So thank you, everybody who has been doing it. If not, please start. We pray every day at 7 a.m. And sometimes, you know, people chime in via text, encouraging each other. But even if you don't have to text in. Just go ahead, wake up, and every day at 7 a.m., let's start praying.
Yeah, I really was not aware of the fact that Sister Linda's son Michael was sick from the virus. I think we've asked her how he's doing, so we're not really sure how he's doing, but Are you still with us, Sister Linda, there?
Yes, Brother Joe, I am here. My son Michael is doing much, much better. Thank you for prayers. His fever broke and he's able to do things like he's an overcomer. Praise our
Praise
Heavenly
God.
Father. So he's doing much, much better. Yes, he still has a little further to go, but doing great. Thank you.
There's some people, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they're saying now that people that have actually been cured, in fact, they're believing now that a lot of people have already overcome the virus and they have antibodies in their blood, plasma, that could be shared to inject people that have this illness and it could cure them. See, so there's a lot of hope for that already. So, but I agree with Sister Cynthia. So I mean, sometimes I feel like I stay in bed a little bit longer, but then I think about the 7 o'clock prayer time, and I don't want to miss out on that, you know. So I make every effort to get up and get going because it matters to God, and it matters to each other. It keeps us together, keeps us stronger, more faithful. And if you do have a petition, you know, let us know about it. You know, we'll be glad to pray over that, you know. And I'm glad that we have the group that we have right now because it may not be a big group, but you know what? We're faithful, we're hopeful, and we have not compromised, you know, the faith. And for that, we're very grateful. Anybody else? So we're going to continue that process. Anybody else have anything else to add before we close?
I just mentioned that I had a petition and there was an error from my agency, but I don't know what happened. But they were gonna try to collect the loan that I got from my retirement. They wanted to do it to collect all the money from me on my taxes. I did file my taxes. I did not anticipate that, so I called them immediately and they said send a letter. So I'm wait to receive the letter because I said, well, if the economy goes down and first of all, I don't have the money to repay immediately. So that's gonna put a very financial burden on my side, but I was just stressed a lot, and that's why I asked a prayer because, you know, I'm in God's hands, and hopefully they, you know, they don't proceed because they said you write a letter, see well if there's a way we can reverse that, but they were basically so close to do it, and that will affect me a lot because I had to get a loan from my bank to get all the 3,000 and something money, pay it back, and as an IRS employee I will have to kind of figure out how to do it, and I don't want to put myself in that situation, and I beg you prayers that gets reversed.
Okay, we'll definitely keep that in prayer. There's a lot of people that have been stressed out about these situations. Even I know you probably don't care too much about those athletes or millionaires that are out there, but since they didn't finish out the year playing, they're asking for their money back too. And so there's kind of similar to what Sister Esther was going through there. So in their case, they're asking for millions of dollars back, you know, but there's a lot of crazy things that are going on there, you know. So we are definitely grateful in my family that the Lord has been very faithful to us and taking care of us as well. I have a lot of work to do still. I have 6 classes that I teach online, so I'm staying very busy with that. But with that said, my oldest son is Stephen. He's unemployed. Um, there's a lot of people like him that have been furloughed, and that means that, well, they haven't been fired, so that's good because they still have a job, but on the other hand, they don't have any income. See, so and I know
Well,
there's go ahead.
I was supposed to go back to work,
Oh,
and they've been paying me, but the way I see things, you know, I'm just don't know at what point they're gonna say, okay, sorry, but you're just gonna have to, your payment is gonna be cut, and you go back to unemployment. It's, oh, please don't let me be, because I struggle enough just in when the economic is fine to do the unemployment. But you know, I know her because my son and my daughter got in line, and you know, my daughter got to pick up the unemployment, but my son, he's still a struggling robber, and you know, Elijah's still working, but it's still, you know, I know, you know, there's one way or another, all this mess is affecting us. And like in my situation, I said, well, we go in recession and things they get more expensive, and then I'm gonna be in debt and more debt, you know. The economy goes back, people get back their jobs, but then I'm gonna be in really bad situation if they proceed in that way for me to pay them all the money anyway.
We don't know how that's going to end up, but we're definitely going to keep that in prayer. And any other prayer requests as we go along throughout the week. I know we didn't pray as a group this morning, but I was trying to get this thing set up so that this Zoom set up so that Stan could take over, and I figured out how to be able to share it with everybody. I think it's gotten better this time, hasn't it? I think last week we were a little cumbersome there, but remember this: make sure you use your computers, not your phones. Okay, even though you can use your phones, it uses up your data, and it's not very reliable. To be honest with you, it's better to use this computer here.
I will have to use the spot if I ever. I'm gonna see if I can borrow the computer from my daughter-in-law, but they do have internet. I don't have internet, and I don't know if they allow me to go over there and do this in the place. But yeah.
Well, we're gonna have to figure out some long-term solution for your computer problems there. Yeah. I may have to put together a little laptop or something for you there. So, but I think it would be wise to try to get internet in your house. It'll be a lot cheaper than using your data in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay. If nobody else has anything else, let's close again in a word of prayer.
I have a question, please. Sure. I would like to know, I see where it says the lesson can be found at hhp/so-and-so and so. With the message as far as that Stan gave, would I be able to hear his voice to go over the whole thing?
Yes, it'll be a recording.
Okay, thank you very much.
It'll be a recording, and you just go to trueheartofworship.org. And then you would look, there's a little folder up there that says online, and and then when you hit the down arrow to get online, you're going to see devotionals, you're going to see lessons, and you're going to see sermons and whatever that you need there. We're going to keep that up there because I know not only us, but there's other people that are looking at that as well. But that's where you're going to get that. So as soon as this is over, recording is over, it'll have to process it, and it'll save it, and then I'll put it on YouTube. And because I have a channel on YouTube, you know, that's called Pastor Joe, and we were having a little confusion there because I had one account for my school and my ministry work, but I finally decided to have two different channels. So now I have a channel for my school where I send my videos to my students about how to do this and that, you know, in technology. And then I also have one for the church folks as well. So those separate channels altogether.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so you'll be fine. Don't worry about that.
And the text for this is already on the website. If you look under lessons, you'll see under the name of this how long the text is already there. And we'll add that video probably pretty quickly this afternoon.
So you would probably put this under lessons, though, right?
Yeah, well, we'll talk. Whatever you think is appropriate.
Well, I don't know. Whatever you feel. They'll find it up there on the online folder. And because we'll have it on video, but we'll also have a handout that if you want to print out later or just look at it on the screen, you can do that later and study that as well. Okay, that's all we have for today. You know, I will bring a message next week, Lord willing, and we will continue this. And I would like to us to extend the invitation to other folks that you may know. If Cynthia knows other people that she would like to link to the to this message, you know, I think Lily might be busy over there with the other church, you know, so that's probably why she's not here. But you could ask the Chavez, for example. You could ask the Melgosas. You could ask Jackie and Dan and people like that. And you know, no commitment or nothing. You know, they can actually log in and participate as well. Who knows? You know, and anybody else you can think of. You know, if you want to invite somebody else, we can do that. We can accommodate them. As you can see on the right-hand side, we have all of the different people that are on today. It's about 7 people. But we can accommodate as many as 300 people, you know, so that's plenty right there. Okay, let's go ahead and bow our heads and go into order of prayer. Thank you, Father, for this time you've given us to be together as your people. We know that you have been among us, that you have given us faith, that you've given us hope, that you've given us confidence, Lord, to proceed and to move forward. For we know that by grace we are saved all the day long. And it is not because we have no fault and no weakness, but it's because we are your children and you have loved us as no one else can, and you abide with us, Lord. And we know that you will reward our faith for being constant, for being faithful, for not giving up. We ask that you will receive our prayer, that you will sanctify us, Father, as always, and give us this day of rest, not just from our labors, but from our worries, from our doubts, from our fears, from our anxieties, from the problems that we face, Father. May you continue to protect us from the evil virus around us. May you continue to strengthen our hand and magnify your efforts among us. We commit ourselves in prayer. Thank you for this fellowship that you've given us today, and ask that you be with us throughout the rest of our week. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Hallelujah. Amen.
Man.
Okay, God bless. I'm going to go ahead and end, and then we'll stop the recording and then have it available later today.